All right, so today we're diving into what is, no exaggeration, probably the most ambitious plan humanity has ever cooked up. Think of it as a global to-do list. And this isn't just some document collecting dust, okay? It's meant to be a real shared blueprint for the future of, well, everyone, the whole planet. So the big question is, how on earth do you even start to write a to-do list for the entire world?
I mean, it sounds kind of impossible, doesn't it? How do you solve the world's biggest, thorniest problems all at once? We're talking about tackling extreme poverty, fighting climate change, and reducing inequality, all at the same time. That is the massive question we're going to unpack here. And believe it or not, that's the exact challenge the world decided to take on.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the urgent problems we're facing. Then, we'll get into the blueprint that's supposed to fix them. After that, we'll simplify the plan with something called the 5 Ps, figure out who's actually supposed to do all this stuff, and finally, we'll talk about that all-important 2030 finish line. All right, so before we can really appreciate the solution, we've got to get a handle on the problems themselves. I mean, why did we need a massive global plan like this in the first place? Let's dive into the core challenges.
Okay, number one, the big one, poverty. And we're not just talking about being a little short on cash here. We are talking about extreme poverty. The goal is nothing less than to completely wipe out the condition of living on less than $1.90 a day. Think about that. This is about making sure every single person has a fair shot with access to the most basic resources and opportunities.
Next up, you have the problem of inequality. That growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And it's not just about bank accounts. We're talking about these massive differences in opportunity, things like access to good healthcare or a decent education. This divide, this gap, it's a huge roadblock to creating a world that's stable and fair for everyone. And then, of course, there's the one that touches literally every single person on this planet, climate change. This isn't some far-off problem for our grandkids to solve. Nope. It is happening right now. It's messing with economies, it's threatening people's way of life, and it hits every country, rich or poor. So taking urgent action, yeah, that's not just a nice idea, it's an absolute must. So you've got these huge tangled problems, right? Poverty, inequality, climate change. It's a lot. The world needed a plan, a shared blueprint. And that blueprint has a name. The Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs for short. But to really get what the SDGs are all about, you first have to understand the big idea they're built on. And here it is. That core idea is sustainable development. Now, this phrase has been around since a big report back in 1987, and it's all about one word: balance. It's not just about saving the trees, okay? The best way to think about it is like a three-legged stool. You need one leg for economic growth, one for social well-being, and one for environmental protection. If you kick out any one of those legs, what happens? The whole thing falls over. It's that simple. Now, these goals, they didn't just pop into existence overnight, not at all. They're actually the result of decades of global meetings and conversations. It really started building back in 1972 with the first big conference on the environment. Then you had the huge Rio Earth Summit in 92, and they even built on an earlier set of goals from the year 2000. So each step along the way was like a lesson, figuring out what actually works when you're trying to get the whole world on the same page. So let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly are the SDGs? Well, it's a set of 17 big interconnected goals, and to make them actionable, they're broken down into 169 very specific targets. Now, here's a key difference from past efforts. These are universal. They apply to every single country, rich and poor alike. It's a shared vision for humanity's future, and it has a very, very clear deadline: 2030. Okay, I know what you're thinking. 17 goals? That's a lot to wrap your head around. But don't worry, there's a really simple way to organize them all, and it's called the 5 Ps. This little framework groups all 17 goals into just 5 key areas. It makes the whole plan so much easier to understand. First up is people. This group of goals is exactly what it sounds like. It's all about ending poverty and hunger, making sure everyone has access to good healthcare and a quality education, and, crucially, achieving gender equality. The whole point here is to make sure every single person can reach their full potential with dignity. The second P is planet. Pretty straightforward, right? These goals are all focused on protecting our home. We're talking about everything from clean water and sanitation, to how we consume and produce things, to taking real action on climate change, and of course, preserving life in our oceans and on land.
It's all about being good stewards of the natural world for generations to come. Our third P is prosperity. This is all about making sure everyone can live a full and prosperous life. And that means things like affordable and clean energy, decent jobs that fuel economic growth, modern infrastructure, and building cities that are sustainable and great places to live. The key is that all this progress has to happen in harmony with nature, not at its expense. Next, we have the fourth P, peace. And this one recognizes a really fundamental truth. You can't have sustainable development without peace, and you can't have peace without sustainable development. They go hand in hand. So this goal is all about building societies that are peaceful, just, and inclusive for everyone, free from violence and fear.
And last but not least, our fifth P, partnership. You can think of this one as the engine that makes the whole thing run. Goal 17 is all about teamwork on a global scale. It's this simple recognition that nobody can do this alone. We can only succeed if governments, businesses, and regular citizens all work together.
So there's the plan, the 5 Ps. But a plan is just a piece of paper until people actually do something. So whose job is it to make all this happen? Who's responsible for turning this blueprint into reality? Well, the answer isn't what you might expect. It's not just one group. It's everyone. This right here is what they call shared responsibility. See, governments are supposed to lead the way by setting the policies, but they absolutely cannot do it alone. You need the private sector, businesses, to drive innovation and put money behind these ideas. You need civil society, community groups, to get people involved on the ground. And you need scientists and researchers to give us the data to track our progress. It's like a giant puzzle. No single piece can solve it on its own. And that brings us to our final part. And honestly, this is the part that adds a serious dose of urgency to this whole conversation. We're talking about the finish line. 2030. That's it. That is the deadline. When these goals were set back in 2015, 2030 felt like it was ages away. But right now, in late 2025, well, that's just around the corner. The clock is well and truly ticking. So the big question is, how are we actually doing? Well, honestly, it's a mixed bag. There's been some real progress for sure in areas like clean energy and building better infrastructure. But, and this is a big but, major global shocks like the pandemic, conflicts around the world, and just massive funding gaps have really knocked us off course. Let me be blunt. Right now, we are not on track to hit that 2030 deadline. So here's the bottom line. The roadmap is there. The plan itself is solid. But what we need now, more than anything, is a massive acceleration. We just need to move faster. We need more innovation and, frankly, a real change in how all of us, from governments to individuals, do things. And so that's where we're left. The world has a plan, a really ambitious one. The goals are crystal clear, we know what the challenges are, and that deadline, it isn't moving. So with the clock ticking and knowing that everyone has a part to play, the only question left is, what's our next move going to be?